I am trying to help you all out because I know you've had a lot of reading, and today you're going to have to finish up those readings. And I even have one more form for the Cold War that will do, but bear with me here. Okay, so, and I'm recording this just in case there are people who are out, like there are some out today. We start off with Truman with the Cold War, right? Right? We have the end of World War II with those conferences at Potsdam and Yalta. We have the United Nations being formed. We have Israel being formed. We have the Nuremberg trials where the Nazis are put on trial, etc. Germany partitioned. But then we also have the beginning of the Cold War. Now, that tension between the Soviet Union and the United States, big deal. By the way, is Russia still communist today?
No.
He says no. You said no in your Google form for the other class. What do you all say? The rest of you say, I'm going to look down at my desk like I'm angry or sad. No, they're not. You'll find out this the Soviet Union fell in 1991. Yes.
Mr. McConnell literally is telling kids that they're still communist. You gotta stop. You gotta put in that. Anna told me.
Yeah.
Like, he won't listen to me.
He was doing that last year too.
Yeah. I told him that
He's
last
telling
year.
everybody in his classes that Russia's still communist.
Well, I wish you hadn't have said that while I'm recording because now it's out there and I can't unrecord it. So we can ask him about it later. You want to go ask him now, right now?
Yeah, I think you guys should have a debate.
I know that you don't want to do work, but we've got to get done with it. We can have a debate after the end of course exam. But yes, if anybody is telling you that Russia is still communist, the answer is no. Are they still a totalitarian dictatorship? Yes. They had a little tiny transition time where they were democratic, but when Putin got in office, he basically clamped down on everything. So you are correct to say that they are not communist today. At the beginning of the Cold War, they were, though, and you have Truman and Stalin duking it out, basically. Now, tell me the name of the term that dominated our foreign policy from Truman all the way through Reagan and Bush. And that is the term that means we're going to keep communism inside their little or their rather large box and not let it spread. Containment, thank you. There was also a 2-word term where Truman said it's going to be our goal, our policy, our official policy, not to send troops all around the world, but to at least send money, some kind of aid, supplies, whatever, to people who are fighting communists. What was that term? 2 words. It even has Truman's name in it.
Isn't it the Truman Doctrine?
Thank you. What was one example of containment and Truman Doctrine where we tried to rebuild Europe after the war was over? Named after the Secretary of State. Marshall Plan. Very good. Oop. What was the closest we got to World War under Truman? It had to do with a certain city in Germany. Yep. Berlin. Then what do we call what happened? Airlift. You can either call it the Berlin blockade, which is what Stalin did, or the Berlin airlift, which is what we did. Okay, then, I mean, there's other stuff, right? But this is the main point, just the high points. Then Truman's popularity, as you saw on the charts, goes way down at the end of his administration because what war was going badly? Yeah. Oh, not yet. Korean War. And he does not end the war. He gets it to a stalemate, basically. Okay, so then we have a president that you have not read anything about yet. I skipped Eisenhower because Eisenhower was not, he's really not on the end of course exam, but I'm going to give you a few minutes worth of Eisenhower just so you can get a general sense of what's going on in the country. First of all, Eisenhower is the first president to use television. This is 1952 when he's elected. This is one of the first television commercials ever that was a campaign commercial. Here you go.
I'm for president, I'm for president, I'm for president, I'm for president. You like ice, I like ice, everybody likes ice for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take ice to Washington. We don't want John or Harry, let's do that big job right. Just get in step with the guy that says, get in step with I. You like ice, I like ice, everybody likes ice for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take ice to Washington. You can't put me on going to travel day and night for president. And they go the other way. We'll all go with I. You like ice, I like ice. Everybody likes ice for president. Stay at the banner, beat the drum. We'll take ice to Washington. We'll take ice to Washington.
Now is the time for all good Americans to come to the aid of their country.
Look in your eyes. Oh, no, it's not there. I don't see it. You don't have it. It is not there. Do you know what I don't see? I don't see the appreciation for this advertisement. It's not in your eyes. Your eyes don't look like you are just wowed. It's awful by this. So you're going to watch it again and you're going to appreciate it this time. Got me?
I'm for president, I'm for president, I'm for president, I'm for president. You like ice, I like ice. Everybody likes ice for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum. We'll take ice to Washington. We don't want John or Harry, let's do that big job right. Just get in step with the guy that says, get in step with I. You like ice, I like ice. Everybody likes ice for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum. We'll take ice to Washington. You can't put me on going to travel day and night for president. And they go the other way. We'll all go with I. You like ice, I like ice. Everybody likes ice for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum. We'll take ice to Washington. We'll take ice to Washington.
Now is the time for all good Americans to come to the aid of their country.
There's one person smiling. Nothing. I got, okay, there you go. At least it was a fake smile. That's, yeah, I'm looking at you, Yancey. This is amazing stuff, don't you think? Okay, fine. We're going to go through it. We're going to analyze it frame by frame.
I'm for president, I'm for president, I'm for president, I'm for president. You
Just starting right there. What is genius about this? What do you call this? Well, forget about him for just a second on the screen. That the what they're singing. What's another name for this type of musical repetition? Okay, how about this? I guarantee you sometime today you'll be going up the stairs, you'll be heading to science class or whatever, and in the back of your mind is going to be, Mike for president, Mike for president, Mike for... and you're going to be like, Dad, got it. What's that called when you can't get a song out of your head? Yeah, it's an earworm. You ever heard of an earworm? It just gets in there and you can't get it out, right? I guarantee it. Now, Why put, who is this? Christian? Christian's talking to Siri. Who did you call this? Uncle Sam, right? Uncle Sam, the great patriotic figure, is leading the parade for Eisenhower,
You like ice,
whose nickname obviously is like, who was Dwight David Eisenhower? Why should you know that name? Well, he wasn't president, but before he was president, oh come on, somebody knows. Of the European theater. Yes, you're right, correct. He was the Supreme Allied Commander of the European theater during World War II. He was one of the masterminds behind D-Day. We haven't gone over that in any depth yet. That's because we're saving it for after the end of course exam. But he was also then the Supreme Commander of NATO. His nickname is Ike.
like ice, everybody likes ice.
Now, that's supposed to be a picture of Eisenhower. I don't think his forehead was that big. But you get the gist of what he looks like. Why is he on an elephant?
Ice for president, and out the band.
Why is this picture on an elephant of all animals? Yeah. Yeah. Republicans' mascot is the elephant, right? Because the elephant is supposed to be strong and steadfast and have a good memory, and the elephant never forgets and all that jazz, right? What's the Democrats' mascot? A donkey, which is also a jackass, you know what? Just saying.
Beat the drum, we'll take back to Washington.
Now look at this. This is effective too, isn't it? What do we got here? What vocation does this person have? He's a chef. How about this person? A nurse. Cowboy, rancher, something. What about this one? Some kind of mechanic has that big wrench, right? Businessman or lawyer, probably the same here. Housewife.
Done, we don't want John or Harry, let's do.
What's this? We don't want John or Dean or Harry. We don't want Democrats. Sorry, I had to burp. I didn't want you to hear the burp sound on the. Now, the guy that Eisenhower was running against was named Adlai Stevenson. Adlai Stevenson was kind of an egghead. If you don't know what that means, is a dork. You're really smart, like kind of nerdy, right? And trust me, from one dork to another, I can recognize one, right? This is kind of a reference to Adlai Stevenson, I think, right here, the Democratic candidate.
Let's take your time, just get it, that was the guy that said to get it.
Now we've got more vocations. What's his vocation? He's got a little T-square there, a little what do you call those little things in math where you use the triangle that has a straight edge? What is that thing called? Something like that. Anyway, it's about measuring angles, right? What's his job? Architect? Nobody knows what architect stuff looks like. Okay, what about this guy? Fireman. What about this guy? Painter. And that's Little Bo Peep. Apparently, she lost her sheep. That's not even funny. You don't know Little Bo Peep? You haven't heard like the nursery rhymes? Never mind.
Except with I, you like ice,
Farmer.
I like ice, everybody likes ice for best.
The nuclear family, mom, dad, biological child there with the dog. The dog has Ike. Even the dog's pulling for Ike. We used to have, my wife and I, a dog named Ike. About that size, about that color. And we took him through the pumpkin show parade. And since my sister's in the Secret Service and her husband, they were our Secret Service agents. And we got fourth place and we got $2.
President, right out the band, beat the drum, we'll take back to Washington. Together we are going to travel day and night for President Adelaide go beyond.
Let Adelaide go the other way. all of the countries going this way, but the Democrats and Adlai Stevenson are going the opposite way. And look at where Adlai Stevenson came from: the nighttime, the darkness. Whereas everybody else was in the daylight with Ike.
We'll all go with I. You like ice, and I like ice. Everybody likes ice for president. Stay up the beat the drum. We'll take ice to Washington. We'll take ice to Washington.
Now is the time for all good Americans to come to the aid of their country.
Now, notice there he's saying if you vote for Eisenhower, it's like you're coming to the aid of your country. It's like the country needs you. And the country needs you to vote for Eisenhower in this election. Otherwise, you're not doing your patriotic duty. So we're starting to talk like that in 1952. All right, let's go back to here. So Eisenhower uses TV commercials for the election. What about the Cold War? Well, there are things about the Eisenhower years that are really cool. One was the Suez Canal crisis. Does anybody know where the Suez Canal is? Yeah. Yep. Very good. You might have heard about that last year or the year before. There's a ship stuck in the Suez Canal. Big deal for international trade, right? The Russians were on one side of this crisis. We were on the other side, and we could have come close to war. It was about the same kind of tension as you feel right now with the Ukraine war. But we're not going to go over that in detail. Good, good memory there. Eisenhower also uses the CIA to topple unfriendly governments around the world, like in Iran. But we won't go into that too much, but just know that that's happening. Under Eisenhower, we rely more on nuclear weapons instead of traditional forces. He tries to actually slow the growth of military spending. There's also the U-2 spy plane incident where we had actually had Khrushchev come over to the United States. Khrushchev was the next guy after Stalin. And we were talking with him, and we were like, he was the friendship, the relationship was growing more friendly. And then they found out that we were spying on them. And actually, one of our planes crashed into Russian territory. The pilot lived, and they captured him and so on. It was a big deal. But what I want you to know most is the space race. Does anybody know who was winning the space race early on? Was it us or was it the Soviet Union? Yeah, the Soviets. Does anybody know the name of the first satellite that went into outer space? Sputnik. It was a Russian satellite. They got the first man-made object into outer space. They beat us into outer space in that way. My parents remember telling me that they were told on the nightly news where Sputnik was in the nighttime sky. Scared people because they didn't know what the Soviets were using it for. Spying, missile guiding, they didn't know, right? It was only about the size of a volleyball, but still. They got the first living being in space. Does anybody know what animal they got into space first? Yeah? Well, that might be true too, but I'm talking about like an actual furry animal. What furry animal did they put into space? A dog. Did you know the dog's name? Nope. The dog's name was Laika. Anybody ever watch Guardians of the Galaxy Part 1? When you get to the collector, that scene with the collector has all these collections, and apparently he collected Laika. You can see a dog running around with the tag Laika on it. But then they put the first astronaut in space on the ship called Vostok. Does anybody remember who they put into outer space? This is what from your JFK form. Nobody remembers this? Nobody? His name was Yuri Gagarin. And not only did the Russians put him in outer space, but he also achieved an orbit around the Earth. Finally, what is an ICBM? Anybody? No? That's fine. Intercontinental ballistic missile, meaning they could shoot a rocket from one continent to another. I wouldn't say they were extremely accurate, but still, they could shoot it from off the, European shore at the United States and hit somewhere in the United States, and that was a big deal, right? Let me show you what our rockets were doing.
America's first attempt to launch a satellite. A 6.5-inch sphere weighing just over 3 pounds was checked out by scientists and declared ready. A great wave of advanced publicity focused attention at Cape Canaveral, Florida, for the launching of Test Vehicle 3 of Project Vanguard. A preliminary to the scheduled launching of a 21-pound satellite in March. What happened is already unhappy history. Another setback for the United States in the race into outer space. Here are official Defense Department films of the launching of the 72-foot missile, a loss of thrust, and fall back to Earth in split seconds.
Oh, there he goes. There he goes. Oh, rats. And that was our space program in the 1950s. They called it Flopnik, they called it Oopsnik, they called it Kaputnik, as you can see down here. So that led Eisenhower to pass the National Defense Education Act, which gave tons of money to public schools because we're falling behind the Russians in math and science. It was the first time the federal government started giving money to public schools. We also have the Interstate Highway Act, which the federal government helps pave highways all across the country. One of the reasons was so that we could tote our nuclear missiles from place to place. You ever wonder why the overpasses have to be a certain height? Semi-trucks, right? Well, at first it was because that's how much was needed for the nuclear missiles to pass under. And you'll notice too, if you're on an interstate highway like 70 or 71, there's usually stretches that are like straight, not curved. And that's so we can land planes in the emergency if we needed to. Now, under JFK, you should know this, Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis. We don't have to go over that right now because I want to give you time to work, right? But we also have the space race under JFK improving. Kennedy tells us that he is going to get us into the moon, by the end of the decade. And by golly, we did get there by the end of the decade. He was dead by that point, but under President Nixon, we landed on the moon. Now, what were the names of the two men in America that got into outer space first to show that we were catching up with the Soviets? So I will put John Glenn was the first American to achieve orbit. So who was the first American in outer space? Helen? Shepard, there you go, good job. There might be two P's in Shepard. But we started catching up. Also, know that this is when the Berlin Wall was put up. Okay, now, you should have yesterday finished the LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson video or form. That was about the Vietnam War starting. And notice that this is a proxy war. That means that we are not fighting the Soviets directly. They are aiding one side, we are aiding the other. And it's kind of like we're fighting the Soviets indirectly. But we're trying to keep communism from spreading to Vietnam because of what Eisenhower called the domino theory. If one falls, then all sorts of other countries will fall. communism. What you need to do today, some of you have not finished the JFK form. If not, it's marked as missing. Some of you have not finished the LBJ form. If not, it's marked as missing. Some of you have finished the Nixon form, which is great. If you haven't, you need to start finishing that. And then some of you have done let's go back here. Some of you have done the Edpuzzle for the Cold War, the crash course Edpuzzle for the Cold War. And if you haven't, you can do that today. So essentially, at the very least, make sure you've got LBJ, JFK, Nixon crash course done today. Try to get one of those done. And that's all.